Steve, we just started recording. Could you start again?
I can do that. Good morning, everyone. Um, Thank you for joining us this morning. And Stacy, I guess the first thing we'll do is go through the roll call.
Sure. Alan Dale, Larry Davis, Linda Dixon, and Chris Garrett sent their regrets. I'll begin the roll call with Sarah Curley Smith, Amy Domorati, Paul Emerson, proxy for Alan Dale,
Present.
Nancy Gucce,
Present.
Andrew Henry,
Present.
Ken Hunsberger, Lauren Jones, Shelley Lorenz, Ian McDonald,
Here.
Braden McNeil,
Here.
Jeff Morose,
Present.
Alex Piggott,
Present.
Bon Salt, George Snyder, proxy for Chris Garrett,
Here.
John Spoulis, proxy for Linda Dixon,
Present.
Emily Stahl,
Present.
Linda Van Dandrishi, Brian Whitwell, Phil Wilson.
Present, and Linda had asked me to be her proxy this morning.
Okay, so you're her proxy. Okay. Linda Van Dandrishi or Linda Dixon?
Vandishi.
Okay. And I see that Amy Domaratsky has joined late along with Shelley Lorenz.
Present.
Okay. And Amy's just joining now. And I see that there hasn't been announcement of this, but Matthew Yarnig is no longer with the committee as he's accepted another position. So we thank them for their contribution. So you're at quorum.
Are we good with the roll call, Stacy? Do we have 14?
Yeah.
Okay, continuing right on. Um, I hope everyone is doing well this morning. It's blustery and cold out here on my farm, but we'll soldier on. It's my first big virtual meeting, so be kind. And it's my first special meeting, so we'll stumble along. First thing I've got to ask this morning, if there are no objections, the agenda that I've put together be adopted as distributed. Moving on, are there any declarations of pecuniary interests? Seeing none, we'll move right into the first report on the agenda. And Janet, are you ready?
Yes, I am. I will share my screen if I can.
It's all yours then. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chair. And I apologize in advance if I'm a little froggy in delivering this presentation. I'm recovering from a cold, so you may see me sipping from water as I need to. This is a really rapidly evolving matter, and we are bringing forward to you some implications of some recent consultations regarding the conservation authorities to try to identify some of the potential implications for the source protection program. And staff are presenting some comments for consideration by the committee. As I mentioned, this is really evolving quickly, so you will see that conservation authorities really across the province, and that includes the 4 conservation authorities that make up the Lake Erie region, bringing reports through their boards over the last couple of weeks and the next couple of weeks to endorse conservation authority comments on this matter from that broader lens of all of the programs and services that conservation authorities provide. So, see if I can. Okay. There are 2 recent proposals from the province to address. So the first is Bill 68, which is the Plan to Protect Ontario Act, which is a larger budget act that included amendments to a variety of pieces of legislation, including the Conservation Authorities Act. And the changes to the Conservation Authorities Act under this piece of legislation really is the creation of the Ontario Provincial Conservation Agency. So this bill was introduced on November 6th and has already received royal assent. So in a further slide, I'll talk a little bit more about what that provincial conservation agency would look like and what the implications are for source water. So there is no consultation on this piece. The second matter is an environmental registry consultation on the proposed boundaries for the regional consolidation or amalgamation of conservation authorities. So this consultation was posted on November 7th, and the comment period remains open until December 22nd. And the consultation includes a number of discussion questions that the province is looking for feedback on, including factors for a successful transition to regionalizations of conservation authorities, what some of the opportunities and benefits associated with the proposal are, looking for input on governance matters, so factors relating to how they would form and develop and appoint members to the boards of much larger regional conservation authorities, how they would handle budget setting processes, and how with these larger organizations, local relationships could be maintained or strengthened. And the report that you've received in your package in the appendix includes slides that the province is using for a variety of Q&A sessions that they're holding with various stakeholders. So they have held a session with conservation authorities, source protection program managers had the opportunity to participate in a session, and I believe there's a series of sessions being held now for municipal leaders. So mayors of municipalities within these regional conservation authorities are being invited to participate along with the chairs of conservation authorities. So the first piece here, the Ontario Provincial Conservation Agency would and will oversee the governance and operations of conservation authorities, and the province is really looking for this agency to help promote consistency, to assess the effectiveness using key performance metrics of conservation authorities and their program delivery, their financial performance, and then particularly as it relates to some program areas around the natural hazard portfolio that conservation authorities deliver, developing and implementing some digital services that would help foster consistency and kind of level the capacity of conservation authorities for some program areas. And that's that second bullet there, the standardization and centralization of processing for permits. So many of you will know that distinct from the source protection program, conservation authorities are responsible for permitting development in natural hazard areas, like floodplains, wetlands, and areas prone to erosion. And addressing consistency and effectiveness in that program area is a priority for the province. This agency also would oversee the regional consolidation of conservation authorities, which I'll talk a little bit more about. And generally, it would advise the province on matters relating to conservation authorities. So you'll see in the slides attached to your report a little more information on the governance of that agency. It would be overseen by a board appointed by the province. There are no direct implications for the source protection program of the creation of this agency at this time, although there are some indirect implications because the agency will oversee that regional consolidation and broadly will provide oversight for conservation authorities and have the ability to issue either binding or non-binding directives to support conservation authorities in their delivery of programs. So the second provincial proposal is the one posted on the environmental registry, the regional consolidation or amalgamation of conservation authorities. And the goal here is for the province to reduce administrative duplication, which they hope will build capacity for frontline program delivery. And importantly, to align conservation authorities, programs, and services with provincial priorities, particularly around housing. So the proposal identifies some suggested boundaries to consolidate the 36 conservation authorities that exist in the province into 7 much larger regional conservation authorities. And the province has advised that these larger regional conservation authorities would continue to operate under the Conservation Authorities Act the way conservation authorities currently do. So they would still have municipal governance and oversight in terms of municipal representation on regional conservation authority boards. The province has clarified that the regional conservation authorities would continue to deliver the mandatory programs under the Conservation Authorities Act, which includes the Drinking Water Source Protection Program, and that they would still have the ability to deliver non-mandatory municipal or other programs and have the ability to enter into funding agreements to do so. And that the way conservation authorities' budgets are funded would not change in terms of the overall sources of funds. The province has advised that the boards of current conservation authorities would remain in place until the next municipal elections, which are this coming October, and that regional consolidation could be initiated early in 2027. So zooming into what this could look like for our geographic area, the province has proposed one of these 7 regional conservation authorities would be the Lake Erie Regional Conservation Authority, which would include the areas highlighted in pink here. So this includes the Grand River, the Upper and Lower Thames River, Catfish, Kettle, Long Point, Essex, and St. Clair. So that also includes the boundaries of the Lake Erie region, source protection region, as well as the Thames-Sydenham source protection region and the Essex source protection area. So it has maintained, although grouped, the boundaries of those features. And you can see this is quite a large geographic area covering parts of 81 municipalities, which is substantive. So there are some considerations for how these proposals could affect the source protection program, and they really, at the scale of information that we have right now, have to do with how certain types of governance elements of the source protection program are defined. So I've listed them here. Currently, under the Conservation Authorities Act and Clean Water Act, a source protection area, which is the jurisdiction we use to establish assessment reports or source protection plans, is defined in the Clean Water Act as a conservation authority jurisdiction. A source protection authority is defined as a role performed by a conservation authority, And so if you see changes to the jurisdiction of what a conservation authority is, without additional amendments to the Clean Water Act, you could see changes to the geographic scale of source protection areas and authorities. Source protection regions are defined in regulation as consolidated source protection areas. And of course, source protection committees have been established at the scale of source protection regions. So changes to these geographic areas could have implications for program administration, operations, and governance. So staff have assessed these potential changes and pulled together some suggested comments for consideration by the committee. These comments could be submitted on behalf of the committee to the Environmental Registry if there was support to do so. And really, we tie our comments back to the Walkerton Inquiry, which established the context and the framework for the drinking water source protection program in the province. And the two key elements there being that they be watershed-based and established at the local level. And so in the spirit of those two recommendations from Justice O'Connor, staff recommendations are that the province retain the current geographic scale of source protection areas. So in this case, for instance, that the Long Point region continue to be a distinct source protection area. And that would allow us to ensure that assessment reports and source protection plans and that policy approach remains locally driven and reflective of local threats and approaches for managing them. It also would, on an operational standpoint, reduce the need for conformity exercises to align source protection plans within a larger source protection region. We're also recommending to retain the current geographic scale of source protection regions. So this is the current working administrative scale for program decisions. So coming back to establishment of the Clean Water Act and development of the program, considerable work was invested in determining the right scale for those programs to be delivered. So our source protection region, inclusive of the Grand, Long Point, Catfish, and Kettle region, was developed to ensure that there was sufficient staff capacity and program expertise across that geographic area. But it wasn't so big a geographic area that we couldn't form those needed local connections with municipal staff and conservation authority staff that are so important to not just updating the plan over time, but assessing implementation challenges and addressing them. And staff also recommend that the province, for similar reasons, maintain local representation on source protection committees and continue to align the geographic scale of the committees with source protection regions. So the current geographic scale of the source protection committee as it is now. And really, again, pardon me, that will help foster local oversight and understanding in policy approaches, but also assessing implementation challenges and progress on achieving the goals of the plan. Apologies. Thankfully, I'm close to the end of the presentation. A few final comments is staff recommend adopting the current scale of source protection regions as the largest geographic extent for regional consolidation of conservation authorities. So this is a recommendation that goes beyond just the drinking water source protection program, but through the quick passage of Bill 68 and the province's framing of the consultation on the environmental registry, it seems likely that the province intends to proceed with consolidation. And so many conservation authorities are considering their comments on the environmental registry with an eye to identifying how to provide constructive comments given the likelihood that the province will proceed with this. And some conservation authorities are proposing that the current source protection region, so again, Grand, Long Point, Catfish, Kettle, in our area be proposed as the largest geographic extent for consolidation of CAs to reflect the established relationships we've developed through the Source Protection Program, and that be the largest geographic extent that would really be functional to foster those local relationships. Staff also recommend reconvening the Joint Advisory Committee, which may not be a familiar term to all committee members, but going back to the early days of the program, the Joint Advisory Committee was provincial leadership for the Source Protection Program, meeting regularly with senior representatives, so CAOs or general managers of conservation authorities, one representation for each grouped area to help facilitate and coordinate the program and address issues. And it suggested that joint advisory committee, which has lapsed over the last few years, be reconvened to advise on matters related to transition of the Source Protection Program under regionalization. And finally, that the province continue to provide funding for conservation authority delivery of the Source Protection Program, and also fund any transitional cost resulting from regional consolidation. And these are the recommendations that staff have prepared for the committee, that the report be received as information, and then it be submitted to the province through the Environmental Registry on behalf of the Lake Erie Region Source Protection Committee. Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Janet. Yes, any questions of Janet? Andrew, I see your hand up.
So just for clarification then, with consolidation of the conservation authorities and likely consolidation of source protection areas, is it feasible that the province might also be considering consolidation of the source protection committees? Like I don't see a lot of clarity in that regard. Because if you've got one conservation, like if you've got one Lake Erie Conservation Authority that's supporting multiple source protection committees, then, you know, logistically that might not make much sense. Could you provide some clarification in that regard?
Through you, Chair. Thank you for the question. The province really hasn't spoken directly to that. So the the Q&A session that we participated in with the director of the Source Protection and Conservation Authorities branch, where the slides that you have in your package were delivered, there were some questions raised regarding scope and scale of some of the governance bodies and source protection committees. And the province advised that they were aware that there would need to be some consequential amendments to the Clean Water Act, and they expressed a desire to avoid unnecessary amendments or reworking of source protection plans and assessment reports. They did not speak to potential changes to the scale of source protection regions or committees. So it is possible that could be the result of regionalization, but the province hasn't advised yet on where they see that landing.
Any other questions of Jan? Don't see many people with their cameras on, so if you've got a question, you'll have to turn your camera on.
Steve, it looks like Nancy has a question.
Yes,
Paul.
I see a question it's disappeared, from Shelley. Can someone find that and read it?
She says, Shelley Loren says, my concern is, as we all saw, the RECO/IPRO scandal shows that centralized regulators are not automatically safer or more effective. Sometimes they can concentrate risk, reduce accountability, and fail when systemic safeguards are weak. Given the vital role that conservation authorities play, water quality, flood control, environmental protection, land use, source water protection, Consolidating them at a regional/provincial level without strong transparency, local representation, independent oversight, and clear enforceable mandates could pose serious risks. I'd like to know whether we should still submit some feedback as a collective group.
Jan, back to you.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, this report proposes that the recommendations included in the report to retain the geographic scope and scale of those governance elements be considered by the committee as a potential submission to the environmental registry as the committee's comments.
Any follow-up questions?
You still have Nancy and Ian?
I'm sorry I missed that myself.
Sorry, Steve, you have Nancy with a question and Ian McDonald as well.
Hey, Nancy, if you'll present your question, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I appreciate all of the comments and agree with what others have been saying. I think maybe further to what Shelley says, and Jan and other conservation authority staff may have a much better understanding of this, but source protection seems to be something that the province at least recognizes in terms of its level of importance, whereas perhaps some of the other programming that conservation authorities are doing doesn't seem as important to the province. I would argue that there is real connection between source protection and all of the other work that the CA does. Do you think it's valuable to perhaps try to discuss the co-benefits of other programs to source protection to really try to strengthen the linkage between a strong conservation authority that is able to undertake the environmental programs, everything from the rural protection programs to water quality, all of that is essential in protecting source protection. And that if you're involved in any sort of ecosystem integrity work. So, is it worth trying to argue that strong source protection requires a strong CA with other programming? Or do you think it's maybe it's a political question, right? Because if you're convoluting it, then does that water down some of the arguments that we would make as a source protection committee that's focused on source protection?
Jan?
Through the chair, thank you for the question. Certainly source protection has been woven into the fabric and supported other programs at conservation authorities. The original development of characterization reports, water budget studies, assessment reports really provided foundational information for conservation authorities that have provided input to other programs and services that the province or that the CAs do provide. I will say the province has been clear to say in this consultation that they are not proposing any changes to the scope of programs and services that conservation authorities could or would provide under regionalization. A regional conservation authority would have the same obligation to deliver the mandatory programs, including natural hazards, source protection and management of conservation lands. It would have the same ability under the Act to deliver some of the other programs that you mentioned, like the Rural Water Quality Program, water quality monitoring, and others through funding agreements with municipalities or others. As to whether the question of the connection between those the source protection program and the other programs speak to regionalization and what the implications there are. I think they often come down to perhaps what the report identifies is larger conservation authorities are less likely to have strong local connection. And the local connection and responsiveness to issues is part of why we have non-mandatory programs that vary from watershed to watershed.
Thank you, Jan. Ian, you have a question.
Yeah, just one clarification and one comment. Just a follow-up to Andrew's initial question. You are taking from the slides that you're recommending that the source protection committees that are in place right now stay in place. Is that what the recommendation was in your presentation?
Through the chair, yes, that's the staff
Good.
recommendation.
Good. That's why I just want to make sure everybody understood that. The other one, more of a comment, was one of your early slides says that there's no direct implications of this change. I'm wondering, is that the province's wording that came to you, or is that something that you slash the Grand River put in? Because I just totally disagree with the fact that there's no implications. I don't think that's a good word to be putting in if you're making any further presentations with it. So.
Through the chair, if I may, that is not the province wording, and I draw a distinction between Bill 68, which created the Ontario Provincial Conservation Agency. That has already passed. One of the objects of the agency is regionalization of the conservation authorities, but no other amendments to the Conservation Authorities Act to affect that regionalization have been made. So the existence of that provincial agency doesn't have a direct impact on the source protection program, in that there's nothing in the current amendments to the act that would change the way the program is delivered. However, the second provincial proposal, that consultation on regionalization, does have direct impacts on the source protection program, on those governance elements, and hence the staff recommendations for comments regarding maintaining the geographic scale of those elements to mitigate those impacts.
I would, as a follow-up to that, I think it's somewhat naive to think that because the act doesn't make immediate difference. Obviously, the next one does, and the regulations that are going to be coming out from that act could have serious implications. So I still object to the use of that no implications.
Thank you for your comments, Ian. Emily, I believe you're next.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a comment there to Nancy's comment in the chat. So just for the group, I think that, from the City of Guelph's perspective, we're looking at drawing the link between the water quantity and quality monitoring that happens at a watershed scale, and the impact of that, especially the water quantity stuff, on the Tier 3 water budgets and any water budgeting through the source protection plans, and the importance of that information and continuity of that information. So just trying to draw that link there for the committee to Nancy's comment. And I think Paul was next.
Thank you. Paul, you're up.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Chair. I thought it was interesting that the way they've structured these 7 regional conservation authorities is, for the most part, at least for ours, is around the Great Lake watersheds. I guess everybody noticed that. I don't think there's been any comment about that, but I just thought it was interesting because, there is some, I'm not arguing for this by any means, but there is some benefit from that. Looking on the other side of the ledger. I remember back when we set up the Lake Erie Source Protection Region, the Grand River wanted to stay on its own. But we joined in with the Catfish, Kettle, and Lone Point at that time, because there was a sense there wasn't the capacity down there and this bigger unit would work well. And, it wasn't a true watershed, but it worked. We've made it work. That's what we're dealing with today. So I'm not sure we're going to turn this ship around. But if we don't turn the ship around, then I think we need to look at this from whatever positive lens we can. And one of the positive lens I see from the region they put together here, the St. Clair region, St. Clair sort of stands on its own, but it does drain right into the river and in Lake Erie. So it makes sense that we're the Lake Erie Source Protection Region or Lake Erie Conservation Authority. We may be able to work more effectively with federal government agencies. That was always a challenge in my day. We were able to pull it off, but it usually was based on interpersonal relationships more than governance structure. So I'm just saying this because we always look at the half empty side, but if we end up with this, we're going to have to try and make it work. And this may be one positive. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Are there any other questions of Jan or anybody who'd like to say anything further? We
Yes,
have,
yes, Chair. I had my hands up, my hand up there, Chair.
okay,
I just wanted to sort of comment that what we have, the ability we have to comment right now is extremely limited. I think all of our concerns are really about the regulation. Specifically, is it 287, I think, that governs the makeup of source protection committees and whatnot. So when public consultation comes up for that, if there's any proposed changes, I think that's where we really get to the meat of this. The government has been quite clear in that presentation on what they're accepting feedback on at this time. And really the only thing they're accepting feedback on is the boundaries of these new conservation authorities regions, the larger ones, whatever they're calling them. So that's, everything else that we're all concerned about and that we want to discuss is not really on the table right now. So I think that's the comment about the, no direct implications yet. I would agree there are no direct implications yet because the government has proposed nothing in terms of source protection, other than some vague promise that things won't change. So I agree with what the things that the GRCA is commenting on, or that they're suggesting that we make a comment on. It's really just things to look forward to in the future, sort of our general comments, but I'm not sure there's much more we can say right now. We'll get our turn. We'll get our chance when it comes to the regs.
thank you, Amy. I didn't really overlook your hand. It seems to take a minute for your hand to show
That's fine.
and the people change on the screen.
That's okay. I wasn't worried that you were ignoring me, Chair.
Are there any other comments or statements that people would like to make?
Yeah, I have a comment.
Yes, Braden.
Thanks, Chair. So I can appreciate that Bill 68 goes far beyond the immediate sort of purpose or the purview of the source protection committees. And I can also really appreciate the fact that GRCA or the source protection committee's comments in the report seem to try to mitigate the overall scale of consolidation and try to maintain the local representation as much as possible, at least maintaining the scale of the Lake Erie source protection region. I think that's really great. But I think that's, I kind of agree with, Amy, that's kind of outside of our scope, right, as the committee. But it really does seem like the objective of the deal, or the objectives of the bill seems to be sort of like a done deal. It looks to me like the main objective is the centralization of permitting and applications. Something that is in the direct, I think, purview of this committee to comment on is just the speed with which these bills are being passed. Bill 28 or 68 got royal assent within 21 days. Yet again, this completely blows past at least our committee's sort of schedule of meetings, which seems to happen every 3 to 4 months. So it just brings to mind our conversation from the last meeting about the sort of record speed that the province is passing these regulations and posting EROs with very, very limited time for comment and consultation. And this may be outside the agenda of today's meeting, but I was wondering if the chair might be able to offer an update on the letter which we voted to draft at our last meeting on this topic.
The letter has been drafted and the letter has been sent. And that's all I can say about that this morning.
Thank you.
Is there any other comments? I'm seeing nothing in the chat. Braden, your hand came back up, or you have another comment?
Nope.
Ian, you're there now.
Yeah, I think continuing on my rant, I don't think just because this is what the ministry is limiting us to comment on does not mean we cannot send some information in terms of our frustration with the process, just because that's not what they want to hear. I think this is our chance, and one of our only few chances to be able to comment on other things that they're not asking for.
Thank you, Ian. Andrew.
I think this is where I caution the committee and the region. Although the actions, the Bill 68 and the ERO posting and subsequent postings are largely geared towards the conservation authorities and their activities. I always caution because of the speed at which things are being done, there's always unintended consequences. And the inherent integration between conservation authority activities and the activities of the source protection areas and the source protection region and the committees, there's likely going to be unintended consequences. And I think that's where we really need to focus. The comments are still valid. We want to make sure that our comments are focused towards ensuring that the source protection planning process and the activities of the source protection committee are still appropriate and not excessively scaled. Ensure that local activities are still focused on protecting source water. I think it's still valid that we comment on these, if for nothing else, just to avoid the unintended consequences, because they are intrinsically linked. You can't avoid that. So it has to be well thought through to make sure that although there's no apparent or there's no known apparent concern with regard to these changes, there still could be because of the unintended consequences down the road. And that's my only comment.
Thank you, Andrew. Any other comments or questions for Janet? Fawn, you've appeared on my screen now.
Okay, you have a couple other hands up as well. I want to. I agree with what Ian and Nancy and Andrew are saying. I think, and also Braden, because all of these things are connected. You're not going to impact conservation authorities the way you're going to, and then not impact us, or not impact the way we do things, or not impact the way the work flows across. And it's the biggest concern is, well, there's a couple of things. The lack of amount of time they've given to respond and properly consult is disgusting. Excuse me. And which is something First Nations, it's not new. Like when, we get these things where the government wants to push all of this stuff across the board. And I think overall, large term picture, it's the impact and what's happening, protections of the environment all across the province. That's a concern. This is just one of those things that's going to impact as well. And it's going to be, an adverse effect. So I feel like you have to say something. You have to say more than what they're asking for. Part of trying to control what you're responding to is a part of the plan, if that makes sense. When I see things like this, I'm so concerned, because it's just a small piece of all these little things they do to create this large impact on what's going to happen. And I'm pretty concerned, and I think that we absolutely have to respond to more than what they're asking us to respond to. Like which?
Thank you, Fawn. Nancy, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say, if we need to focus on the regionalization aspect of committees, or discuss, like let's imagine what it would what a source protection committee would look like if we had to take care of the entire Lake Erie regional conservation that they're proposing. When I still feel relatively new to this committee, and it's probably been over a year now, but there's a lot of, it's a steep learning curve to learn about all of the policies, and they're all very local, and it's really important for the committee to be engaged at a level that makes sense to us and that we can comprehend and that we can wrap our heads around and pay attention. You know, source protection comes down to understanding what's happening at that site so that you're not contaminating that well. If you move up to that larger scale, it's going to be really difficult for a volunteer-based committee that is so fundamental to source protection to maintain the kind of monitoring and attention that's required to protect each individual source.
Thank you, Nancy. Is there any other comments or questions for Jan? Amy, you're back on.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify my comments. I'm not suggesting that we limit our comments to specifically the boundaries of the merging of the conservation authorities. I was pointing out that's all that the government is asking for. But the report that we have been presented with that we're reviewing today does include, I think, all of these concerns that I'm hearing. It includes maintaining the current geographic extent of source protection areas, source protection regions. It does comment on those things as offering them, but my point was all we're really doing in that in what if we vote on this today is we are saying these are things that should be considered later. So in the regulations, these will be things that will be considered. So these will come back to us in commenting periods in the regulations, but we are putting those points forward right now in this report, even though that's not specifically what we're being asked to comment on. So I just wanted to clarify that I'm not suggesting we don't comment.
Thank you very much, Amy. All the comments have been valuable to me. Jeff, you're up next.
Yeah, and to follow up on that, acknowledging that we may have future opportunities to comment on proposed legislation based on the speed that we're seeing things tabled and approved. They're posting things to the ERO with 30-day commenting windows, and they're closing them. They're receiving royal assent before the 30-day commenting window is even up. So waiting for future opportunities to comment on new legislation is going to put us in the exact same position that we've been in with this most recent batch of omnibus legislative changes. So I do fear that if we don't get comments out there proactively, we missed our window already. So I'm supportive of providing more now that may be slightly outside of the scope of what the province is asking for, so that we can at least get the message in there for consideration before they table new legislation, because I'm concerned that they're not incorporating feedback right now because they're closing these things before commenting windows end. So that's my 2 cents on the situation.
Thank you, Jeff. I saw a lot of clapping hands go across my screen. Does anybody else have any comments?
I have a quick comment. This is Braden.
Braden, yes.
Sorry to jump in. So I guess we will go to a vote shortly on whether or not we agree to submit these reports to the province for consideration. But perhaps we should also consider a motion along the lines of our motion from the last meeting, where we have the committee chair and submit a letter specifically on the committee's behalf that highlights our concerns that Bill 68 could inadvertently result in some changes to the operation of source protection authorities and source protection regions, with a focus in our comments on the importance of maintaining local control and representation in the implementation of the Clean Water Act.
Thank you, Braden. Caitlin, did you catch any of that motion, perhaps?
Just to clarify, I'm very new to the committee and not overly familiar with the procedures, the formal procedures of these types of committees. I was merely suggesting that we should potentially consider a motion.
Okay, that's good. Amy, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I think perhaps before we do anything with this report that's on the table, I think perhaps it would be helpful if Stacy reviewed the 4 points that are in this current report. So what we're being asked to do here with this report is approve this report, have this report sent on our behalf through the EBO to make these our official comments. And I think this contains everything that I'm hearing everybody say. So just before we get to the point where we're going to vote on this report, I just think it'd be great if just Stacy, because we had so much conversation now, we may have forgotten what happened in the beginning. It might be helpful if Stacy just reiterates, I think there's 4 or 5 key points in there about source protection committees and regions and whatnot, just so we're
Sure.
all clear on what exactly we're going to be voting on shortly.
Sure. Jan is still here and she can go over the 4 points for you.
Oh, sorry, I had the wrong name. Sorry.
That's okay. So we're just all on one name here. In
I
your
see. Yes. Okay. Sorry about that.
No problem.
That's okay. Through you, Chair. Thank you. I will clarify what, if the committee endorses the report recommendations as they are written, then the committee's comments to the province would be to continue to consider Justice O'Connor's Walkerton Inquiry Report, which recommended watershed-based source protection planning at a local level by those most directly affected, to retain the current scale of source protection areas, to ensure that local reflection of assessment reports and source protection plans, and reduce the burden of consolidation, to retain the current geographic scale of source protection regions as the working administrative scale for the program, to maintain local representation on source protection committees, and to continue to maintain the source protection region jurisdiction of committees, and to adopt the current scale of the source protection regions as the largest geographic extent for proposed amalgamation of conservation authorities into regional conservation authorities, to reconvene the Joint Advisory Committee so knowledgeable conservation authority leaders can inform the process, for the province to continue to fund the source protection program and fund any consequential costs of the program as a result of regionalization.
Thank you for that, Janet. Any other comments or questions of Janet before we move forward to the 2 resolutions that Janet read earlier in her presentation? Ian, you're back on.
Yeah, I still think following up on what Braden's introduced and what Jeff was talking about is we still need something in there with respect to our displeasure with timing and that we're going to need more time for when these other regulations coming out as a result of it. I think we need something like along those lines in there. I'm not proposing the wording that goes with that at this particular stage. I bow to others that may be better at drafting something like that. But that issue is, I think, is something that we need to put in.
Thank you for that comment, Ian.
Chair Walsh, can you hear me?
Yes.
It's Linda Dixon.
Hi, Linda.
Hi. I am supportive of the report and the recommendations. And I appreciate and I understand, and I'm very frustrated too with the speed at which things are being pushed forward. And I think we put that letter forward, and maybe if we want to reiterate it again in some other fashion, but my concern in including it in the recommendations is that it might, I don't want to upset the government by pushing that and not focusing on things that are really conducive to source water protection and making sure that things, we kind of maintain status quo, because what's working isn't broken. And by, I think, including that recommendation, while I agree with it and I support it 100%, I think it might take away from the validity of what we've already put forward. So I would not be supportive of including something like that in this particular recommendation going forward, but maybe finding some other way to ensure that we let the province know of the displeasure with which things are happening, the speed at which they're happening.
Thank you, Linda. Ian, got your hand up again.
Yeah, I totally disagree. I mean, if we have displeasure of things, then we have to voice it. And this is, if we find what is his other method of doing it? Yes, his letter's gone in. Well, we haven't seen the letter. I don't think that. I think we have to keep on knocking it on. We can't sort of be afraid of what the government's going to do. We have to let the government know that we're not happy about it.
Thank you, Ian. Emily.
Yeah, I'm also just going to support the idea of ensuring that we have that comment in here. That's consistent with all of the City of Guelph's commenting right now. It is our standard last paragraph in every ERO comment now that we've done in the last year about timelines and not having enough time to review things. I do, though, like a little bit of the reframe on it as speaking to like the next step, that we want more time in the next step when we look at the regulations, right? So if we're just kind of spin this a little bit differently, right? Maybe Linda taking a little more of a not positive, but different view on what we're looking for. We're looking for more time the next time they produce that ERO posting.
Thank you, Emily. Any further comments? Andrew, you're on.
I think just for my clarity, I think we're talking about two different things. The recommendation is that this report is being submitted to the environmental registry as our comments to that posting. But the separate is the chair draft a letter to the minister saying, look, as this unfolds, we need more time to assess the implications to source protection planning and the activities of the Source Protection Committee, and we're requesting more time in future as regulations are drafted. That's I think maybe we make that distinction. The letter doesn't have to go to the ERO posting; it should go to the minister.
Braden.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up on Emily's comment that this is pretty much a de facto always included comment at the end of every response to an ERO, that the timing, the timing for these postings is not long enough and more time is needed. If this is something that's being added to every single response to an ERO, it seems like it may be falling on deaf ears. And so maybe an all of the above approach would be best. And so what I'm potentially suggesting is maybe we amend the report here to include a comment along these lines, as well as, as Andrew just pointed out, draft a letter and send that directly to the minister.
Thank you, Braden. Jeff.
Yeah, Braden just he kind of just stole my thunder there. I was going to suggest that the last point there, reconvening the Joint Advisory Committee, perhaps that's where within this report we can work in a comment about re-engaging this committee so that we can be provided the opportunity to have input to changes to governance structure ahead of legislation being tabled so that we're not commenting through an ERO posting process. We should be given, as the technical experts on source water protection in Ontario and decision makers, we need advance notice of legislation that's being tabled so we can provide more proactive feedback. And if the government is displeased about comments being received in a more public forum, then they should be engaging us for technical discussions before this legislation comes out. So I don't know how I feel about a letter because I understand the risks of having some animosity directed towards a committee if we're providing letters that are public like that, or providing a follow-up letter immediately after we've already provided that same message in a letter. I don't have a firm stance on that, but I do want to see that last recommendation reflected, modified to kind of reflect that we should be having these discussions with joint technical advisory committees ahead of legislation being put out there.
Thank you, Jeff. To recap, we do have two resolutions here. I'm hearing mixed opinion and comments. I should have maybe had the mover and a seconder first, but I would like to move on. We'll handle the resolutions first and see if they pass or don't pass. If they don't pass, or we can do follow-up with a letter, has been suggested too. But I think we're getting so much mixed comments all around the same subject is what I'm sort of hearing. So I'll move on with the resolutions. And the resolution as stated by Janet was that report SPC 25-1201, proposed regional constellation of conservation authorities be received as information, and that SPC 25-1201 be submitted to the province through the Environmental Registry on behalf of the Lake Erie Source Protection Committee. Is there a mover and a seconder for that? A mover is Andrew, a seconder is John Seplis. Any further discussion before I call the question? Jeff, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, so this is my question. If there's support to modify one of the recommendations back to the province in this report, I think we need to, and I'm not great with process either, but I think we need to table a motion to direct that recommendation is modified to include some better language around providing timely advance notice and technical working groups before legislation is tabled. So I don't think we can vote on whether we should submit this report at this point until we're clear that what's in the report we all agree on and the recommendations are all to the committee's satisfaction.
So you're suggesting really an amendment to the motion. And I've got the mover and the seconder. So the mover and the seconder, do you agree with an amendment to the resolutions as presented? I'm not seeing agreement on that, Jeff. So,
Chair.
Yes.
It's Janet here. Perhaps Caitlin and I could offer some suggestions regarding process, if that would be helpful.
Yes, it would be helpful.
So to clarify, if the committee would like to make some additional comments beyond what is in the report, one option would be to, if the committee was satisfied with the content of the report, to continue forward with the current recommendations and add a recommendation and further that. And then the committee would state the mechanism for the comment, whether they would like the comment submitted to the environmental registry Or if the committee prefers a letter from the chair to the minister, and the committee could then state what that additional comment would be. Um, and um, um, and the committee could move and second and vote on that suite of recommendations. Just to clarify, we would not be modifying the report that the committee has received, but the committee's resolutions and discussions would be documented in the minutes. Caitlin, anything further on the process side?
No, I think that covers it. Just that we would proceed with the comments that are in the report, and then we could add either, as Jan said, additional comments through the ERO on behalf of the committee, either directly to the ERO or through a letter, depending on the motion that's put forward. We would probably be looking for direction from the committee on exactly what those comments are so that we can articulate them properly. So we would like to see that in the motion itself, if possible.
Ian,
How does that look though when you put in two separate things into the ERO? Should it not be one cohesive piece of thing that's going in? Like, why would you have two submissions? You would have one, if a committee is making a submission, it should be one submission. I'm just wondering about the how it looks, point of view. But I think if that's the way we have to go, then I think it's a good compromise. I'm wondering about the how it looks on things. That's all.
Ian, where I was going with this was that we handle the resolution, and then I was hearing fairly loudly that you wanted a separate letter that went straight to the minister.
I would disagree with that. I think that's where we have the discussion in terms of things. At one point, I thought you said the letter was drafted and it went. Did you not say that at the beginning of the meeting?
A letter was drafted after the last meeting and was sent.
Okay. So have we seen that letter?
It went direct to the minister, waiting for a reply.
No, did we see that letter?
May I offer a clarification that might be helpful?
Go ahead, Janet.
At the previous meeting, the Source Protection Committee directed staff to prepare a letter on behalf of the chair regarding the short timelines for the recent consultations on the Clean Water Act proposals, not on this Conservation Authorities Act proposal, which hadn't been released yet.
Right.
So that letter regarding the Clean Water Act consultations was drafted and submitted, and the committee will receive a copy of it in the agenda package as correspondence at the next agenda.
Right.
So that's where we're at with that, Ian. That's why you haven't seen that letter.
No, and that's why, because I don't think we're talking about two different letters here, and I think that where the discussion is should another letter go with respect to our timing issue, or should it be included and made it public with our ERO submission?
That's where
what we're trying to go with.
That's where I was trying to take you. I was hearing you wanted a new letter. Amy,
I personally do not want a new letter. I want it to go with the ERO submission. I think it should be made public rather than just going to the minister, because then it doesn't get the word out there in terms of things on it.
Thank you for your thoughts, Amy.
Yeah, I'd just like to clarify when I think it was Janet offered some sort of a suggestion about how to proceed forward, which was adding something onto this, like accepting the report as is and adding something onto it. Was that just a suggestion of something we could do, or are our hands tied here that we can't modify this letter? Because what I'm hearing from a lot of people is the neatest way to do this and the way people would like to do this, and I really like Jeff's suggestion about the Joint Advisory Committee, is that if we can modify this letter, that would be the best way to do it. But I wasn't sure if you were telling us that's like in our governance structure or whatever, that's not an option. So you just clarify, are we allowed to modify this letter or not?
We are allowed to modify that resolution to include what we talked about earlier, and that's what Caitlin and Janet were tabling.
And would that modify the letter, or would it just be when this goes to the just be, I don't know, captured in the minutes or some other note, or would we actually be saying like if we decide the reconvening the Joint Advisory Committee would actually be modifying that bullet? That's what I don't understand.
It would be modified. I don't know whether we could capture everything that's been said this
Well,
morning.
absolutely. I
Yeah.
just wasn't sure if we were proposing modifying the letter or adding an addendum, or because I think it should all be, I agree with Ian that this should all be captured in our comments. So
Chair,
just a
may I offer
clarification.
a clarification?
Yes, Janet, please.
Thank you. Through the chair, the committee has a number of options. So one option is to pass additional resolutions or new resolutions. And those resolutions can direct the mechanism by which comments would be submitted. So what I had proposed earlier is so that the committee has already received the report. The committee may accept those recommendations or not, and may accept other recommendations. The report itself that the committee has received would not be edited. But if the committee did not support the recommendations in this report, the committee could pass recommendations that explain its comments, or the committee could accept the report and add an additional resolution, and further that the committee and could embed its comments in there. In terms of how it would actually be submitted, one option is that based on those comments, the staff will draft a submission to the environmental registry. And that would consist of a cover letter that would include the committee's resolutions. And if the committee so directed, it would also include this report as documentation of the committee's comments.
How you do?
That's one option. A second option would be to some members have suggested writing a letter to the minister directly, separately from an ERO submission, to provide comments. So that letter has not been drafted. The letter referred to earlier that has already gone in was not on this matter. It was on a different matter. Pardon me. I hope that is helpful. To reiterate, what we're looking for the committee to do is to make a decision on the two recommendations that have been moved and seconded, and to make a determination whether any additional recommendations will be put forward and voted on by the committee.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So the recommendation has been moved and seconded. So at this point, if a committee member wanted to move an amendment to that, to include comments regarding the timeliness and the timelines of providing comments, then we could vote on that amendment and then come back to vote on the original order. I don't want to get sidetracked here. I think we need to stick to the process.
Yes, I agree, Andrew, and that's where I was trying to go with that, was we got a mover and a seconder. And then there was a suggestion that we amend the resolution, but the mover and the seconder apparently weren't in agreement. So we do have the subject on the floor, the resolutions, and I will repeat them, is that report SPC 25-1201, proposed regional consolidation of conservation authority, be received as information, and that SPC 25-1201 be submitted to the province through the environmental registry on behalf of the Lake Erie Region Source Protection Committee. We've had our discussion. There didn't seem to be anybody, the mover, the seconder, willing to change that. Braden, you have a question.
Just to follow up, I think, to Ian's earlier comment or question about whether or not submitting a second report or submission to the ERO would look bad. I kind of disagree, and I think it would perhaps put a finer point on, the second submission if it were to just focus on the question of timeliness and time for consultation. And so, yeah, I understand the point of order here is that we need to vote on this report, but just want to clarify to the committee that there's nothing preventing us from moving a second or tabling a second motion, right, to draft and submit additional comments, and or a third motion to draft and submit a letter directly to the minister.
Exactly. Are there any questions before I call the vote on the resolutions I've read? Seeing no.
No. Sorry to be a pain in the ass, but if we don't agree that we're going to do the other part, then I'm not going to vote for approving what's going in. So you're asking us to put the cart before the horse because I'm fully in favor of submitting what is there. But if we're not going to do the other part, then I'm not going to support this part.
Well, Ian, the problem is we have a group of people that like what they see.
I agree. I like what let me be clear. I'm totally in favor with what we see, but it's but if we're not going to do the other part, then I'm not happy with the submission because the submission isn't there.
And that's your entitlement. The only thing I can say, if you have a change that you would like to make to the resolutions as presented, that you table that now to the mover and the seconder to see if they are in agreement or not.
It's already been tabled and they haven't agreed with it, so go ahead.
Oh,
okay, Amy.
I just want to say we haven't actually tabled anything. We had a vague thing. Would the mover and the seconder agree to something? I'd like to table an amendment. I would like to add onto our resolution, and furthermore, and I might need help with the wording. I just want to add something, and furthermore, that our source protection committees be provided with an opportunity to consult on changes to regulations related under the Clean Water Act in advance of those regulations being tabled. Something along those lines. So I'm proposing that we add it to our wording of our motion. And that goes as a cover letter. Our motion goes as a cover letter on this when it gets submitted.
Thank you, Amy. I think we're getting there. Does the mover, that was you, Andrew, didn't you move that?
I did, yes.
Do you agree with that amendment?
Yep, I'm fine with that amendment.
And John, you seconded it?
Yes, I agree with that amendment.
Thank you. Okay,
Chair, just
I guess Stacy.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Chair. If you would like, would you like me to read something back for the committee in terms of that motion?
I was just going to ask that, yes.
Wordsmith what I said, please.
Okay. So the two resolutions are in front of you already, and then further that, the Source Protection Committee's comments to the ERO request adequate time to review and comment on amendments to the Clean Water Act and regulations resulting from the regionalization of conservation authorities.
Thank you, Caitlin. Are there any further questions? Amy, you got your hand up.
I just think we missed something in there about timing. We said that we want to comment. There wasn't anything there about timing.
Further that the comment request adequate time to review and comment.
Okay.
On the amendments to the Clean Water Act and regulations resulting from the regionalization of conservation authorities.
Okay.
Jeff.
And can I please add to that, through consultation via the Joint Advisory Committee, think that's the mechanism, that's the committee, that's the place we want to have these conversations. So I think we want to make that clear.
Thank you. We'll have to get this written down, and our mover and seconder are going to have to agree to all this. So the more we change it, the more we're giving everybody lots to think about. Braden, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that Caitlin, the text that you've written there sounds perfect to me, but misses the key point in Amy's amendment, which is that there be a mechanism for consultation with source protection committees, which also goes to what Jeff just commented on. And so just one more point to add to the proposed text there.
Thank you, Braden. Amy, I want you to listen carefully when we get this back, that your amendment is
Small ears.
okay.
Okay. Further that, the Source Protection Committee's comments to the ERO request adequate time for the Source Protection Committee and the JAC to be engaged in the review and comment on amendments to the Clean Water Act and regulations resulting from the regionalization of conservation authorities.
I'm okay with that.
Andrew, are you okay with the changes?
Yes, I'm okay with that.
John?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Okay, we've played around with this for a while. I'm going to call the vote now. I've got a bunch of non-camera people, so I don't know how you're going to have to turn your cameras on so we can see you. Give you a second to do that. Stuart Sutherland.
That's a staff member.
Okay. Jamie Lauren Jones. Sarah Smith. Don't know whether they're with us any longer. So we'll go through this anyway. All those in favor of the amended resolutions, please raise your hand. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. I'm counting 18 hands, and I know that there's several people. George, you're counting twice. John, you're counting twice. Paul, you're counting twice. And Phil.
Chair, Linda Dixon's online, so I'm no longer a proxy for Linda.
She's
Okay.
via phone. If she could say if she's forward or against.
20, 21. So if I count that right, I got 22 in favor. Is there anybody opposed? Seeing none, that resolution as amended is passed. Does anybody need a 5-minute break before we move on to Caitlin's presentation? Amy, want a break?
I would just like to say that I'm afraid I have a hard stop at 10:30. I'd just like to confirm, if I leave, do we still have quorum?
We do.
Okay, then my apologies. I'm going to have to step out, but thank you everybody for this great discussion.
Thank you, Amy. Caitlin, are you all ready?
I am, yes. I will share my screen here. Give me 1 moment.
I think Jeff has a question, maybe.
I just saw Jeff's hand.
I do. I have a bit of a question about process, and we had two resolutions that were, or two motions that were bundled together there. I think everybody was in favor of receiving the report, but when the motions were bundled together like that, the second motion was to direct staff to submit the report. So it's a question about process. Like, is it appropriate to bundle motions together like that, where we may support the first one, but not fully support the second one without modifications? So it's a process question. I don't know how this would normally go like this, but that is kind of what introduced the challenge with this most recent vote that we just did here, that they were bundled.
They were bundled, and that's the way we've done it. It's outlined in our rules, procedures, code of conduct, and conflict of interest policy. I think we captured everything that needs to be done, and the motion passed.
Yeah, and I appreciate that response. I just wanted to check in on process, and perhaps if there's a suggestion for a takeaway, that we consider items more individually, because this was the opportunity for the committee to review kind of the recommendations and provide feedback on it. So perhaps that's not the right process. I'm not too familiar with process, but perhaps a recommendation that could be considered for future meetings where we have multiple motions.
Thank you for your comments, Jeff. Is something I'll consider as I go forward. Caitlin.
Here. Good 1 minute. It's not appearing on my screen. I can see it is on your screen, but not on mine.
It's on my screen.
Yeah, hopefully everyone can see that now. Thank you, Chair. So report SBC 25-1202 provides an update on the proposed changes to the Clean Water Act and associated regulations since the discussion at the last SBC meeting on October 30th. As a refresher, on October 20th, the province released 2 ERO postings for consultation that proposed changes to the Clean Water Act and its associated regulations. The first ERO, Jan spoke to this a little bit earlier, but it included the legislative amendments to the Clean Water Act, which was tied to Bill 56, Building a More Competitive Economy Act. So the comment period was open for 11 days prior to Bill 56 receiving royal assent on November 3rd. So as per the resolution that was passed by the committee at the October 30th meeting, and we've discussed this already a little, but there was a letter sent to the minister on behalf of the Source Protection Committee that expressed concerns about the short consultation period and to request more time to be provided in the future to comment on ERO postings that were related to source water protection. And as Jan mentioned, that letter would come back as business arising from the previous meeting at the next regular meeting through correspondence to the committee. So the changes to the Clean Water Act under the current ERO that's still open, which is 025-1104, essentially allows for the changes to the regulations. So this includes regulatory changes to Ontario Regulation 28707 under the Clean Water Act, creation of a new minister's regulation, and changes to Ontario Regulation 20518 under the Safe Drinking Water Act. So the comment period for this particular ERO does close tomorrow, December 4th. The proposed regulatory changes do impact how source protection plan amendments will be consulted on and approved. So these changes are intended to facilitate more timely amendment on source protection plans, and it includes expanding the list of administrative plan amendments under Section 51, and these types of amendments do not require consultation or approval. So for example, it could be a replacement well with no new drinking water threats associated. The proposed changes allow the Source Protection Authority to approve routine plan amendments instead of the minister. For example, a new drinking water system, but there are existing policies already being applied to this new area. And the proposed changes allow the Source Protection Authority to recommend to MECP when a drinking water works permit or license can be granted before there's an amendment to the source protection plan. It involves streamlining consultation with implementing bodies and the public at the same time, and setting clear timelines for approval of plan amendments by the minister. The proposal also included changes to prescribed instrument policies to standardize how these policies are used to manage drinking water threats. The changes include standardization of prescribed instrument policy wording and annual reporting requirements directly in the regulation. Removing the ability to prohibit existing threats through prescribed instruments, and restricting the use of Part 4 policies where there's a prescribed instrument already in place. So these changes reflect provincial messaging that's been received over the last couple of years and are intended to reduce duplication in regulatory process. So in other words, where a prescribed instrument and Part 4 tools tend to overlap. Increase the consistency in how source protection is considered in prescribed instruments to ensure timely reviews of existing prescribed instruments and to improve the annual reporting on the implementation of these policies. So on November 28th, the Grand River Source Protection Authority endorsed staff comments that were provided in their report SPA 11-2501, and that report is also attached to your report for you. As implementers of the municipal source protection policies, the implementation working group also met to discuss the ER proposal on November 26th and supported these staff comments in particular on the prescribed instrument policies. So the comments in that Grand River Source Protection Authority report have been submitted to the ERO on behalf of the Grand River Source Protection Authority as the lead SPA for the Lake Erie region. So these comments support the proposed changes to the plan amendment approval process as they streamline obtaining plan approval where there's existing protections already in place, and the updates are minor. And the Source Protection Authority comments on the proposed changes to prescribed instruments did include the following recommendations for consideration by MECP. So it was recommended that the standardization of prescribed instrument policies should still allow for identifying additional non-binding terms and conditions in the policies for consideration by the issuer of the instrument. It was recommended that restrictions on the use of prescribed instrument policies to prohibit existing threat activities should not be extended to any prescribed instruments that are issued under the Nutrient Management Act. And this is to ensure that prohibitions that are in the Nutrient Management Act that apply in WAPA A can still apply to other highly vulnerable areas. And there was a recommendation that the restrictions on the Part 4 policies should not be extended to prescribed instruments under the Nutrient Management Act. And this is because it provides greater certainty of protection by allowing risk management officials to inspect and ensure compliance with risk management measures. So the next steps is if the proposed regulatory amendments are adopted, then Lake Erie Region staff will review and update our internal procedures for amendments to the source protection plans, and then facilitate the required changes to the prescribed instrument policies for all of our Lake Erie Region source protection plans. And the recommendation in the report for you is to receive this update as information. Thank you, Chair. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Caitlin. Are there any questions of Caitlin? Are there any questions of Caitlin? I got a bunch of cameras turned off and I don't see anything coming through in the chat. Well, if there are no questions, I'll call for a mover and a seconder to the resolution. The resolution being that report SPC 25-1202, proposed changes to the Clean Water Act and regulations be received for information. A mover and a seconder, please. Ian's going to move it. George is going to second it. Thank you. Any discussion with respect to the motion on the floor? No motion, no discussion. I'll call the vote. need a bunch more cameras turned on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. I believe that's a total of 19. Caitlin, Janet, Stacy, do you agree?
The motion is carried. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Well, that comes to the end of today's meeting. I would like to thank everybody for their attention and time today. It's interesting times, and there was a lot of good comments earlier. I do appreciate your input, and to close, I hope everybody has a great month of December and get those homes really decorated up for the festive season. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, thank you.